we exist 90% in a private realm. Very, very few architects and designers even engage with the public realm. Like how many people do you know designing promenades or designing public spaces or streets or footpaths, or as compared to designing like a high profile residence for 3 people, which gets featured into like say 15, 20 design magazines. The impact, if you measure impact, like what have we impacted as a community of so-called professionals?
Ayaz Basrai is one half of the duo behind the Busride Design Studio, an architecture and design firm. The other half being his brother, Zameer Basrai. Spaces such as the Bombay Canteen, Bhane, House Deli, Toit Brewery, Social, Café Zoe, and E11 Cafe are a few of their designs. But through the Busride Design Lab set up in Goa, Ayaz hopes to focus his work on solutions that can bring better public spaces for humanity. From the design of homes post-COVID to the role of aesthetics, let's listen to how he thinks design will evolve. So how you been doing during this lockdown? How are things for you?
I think we're probably part of the privileged class, so it's been okay actually. I mean, it's been obviously a mixed bag. I mean, my whole family is in Bombay, and fairly. So we're going through the big city, big city trauma, but at the same time, I live in Goa, and it's a bit better here for sure. We're kind of taking each day as it comes, I guess. Yeah.
Okay. Could you tell me a little bit about where you grew up and, what made you choose this line of work?
I'd say for almost the first half of my life, I think my entire world was like within maybe 1.5 or 2 square kilometers. I was pretty much, I was born in some complicated place in a small village in Andhra Pradesh. But post that, pretty much, brought up in Bandra, and that's even in my head right now. That's still home. Pretty much grew up there. School was there, and family's there, and friends are there. So,
could I ask how you were born? Why you were born in Andhra Pradesh? Were any of your parents from there, or?
No. So my grandfather, my mother's father, was posted there. He was a mining engineer. Okay. So he was overseeing the mines in around the Godavari. So there's a lot of coal mining that happens there. So I was born in and around a fairly dystopic extractive mining procedure.
Which place is it? Which town or?
It's called Ramagundam. It's like a really tiny town.
Okay. I'm asking all this because I was also born in a very small town in Andhra Pradesh.
What are you saying? Maybe you're like on the next bed or something.
No, it wasn't Ramagundam. It was actually Rajahmundry. I don't know if you've heard of it.
No, man. I barely remember Ramagundam. So
it was a small town now. No, it's quite a bustling, mid-size. Yeah.
Yeah, like everything else, I guess. Yeah.
So you grew up in Bandra.
Yeah, so Bandra was pretty much where everything happened. I did my schooling there, and I think post-school, college was in town, which was anyway a trek. So I went to Xavier's for 2 years, and that felt like going to another country or something. Me and this very close friend, Akash, who does a lot of theater work right now, we used to travel to town by train, and used to desperately wait to get back to Bandra, because being in Kolaba or being in around VT felt like we've come to some other country sometimes. So it's fairly domiciled in Bandra for most of my initial life, and then when post that, design school was in Ahmedabad, so I studied industrial design at NID.
What made you choose that line of work?
I actually completely stumbled into it. There was no plan as such to do industrial design. I had not heard about industrial design before my 11th standard, and but then there was this fairly serendipitous thing that happened. One of our very close friends from college, he told us this really random thing in college around the fact that his grandmother lives in Ahmedabad, and she has this beautiful house and she has a pool, and that was enough. So we were like, man, we need to go to Ahmedabad. So we just took a train and went to this guy's granny's house.
Okay.
And his grandmother happened to be, one of the Lal Bhai in the Lal Bhai family, which is one of the, prominent founding families of the city. And we, of course, had like a fantastic time in her pool. And then she was like, she wanted to get us out of the house maybe. So she said, you guys should really get out and do some more cultural things. So she said, I can connect you with someone who's at a couple of these campuses. You should definitely go check them out. Because we loved her house, and her house is this beautiful exposed brick concrete, really lovely place. And she said, if you like this house, you should definitely go check out NID, the NID campus. And I walked into campus, and obviously we're fairly like, badly behaved kids. So we also found a few people who were standing at the main gate at NID and having chai, and we actually ragged them. Like we were not even from the campus. We just went in and started like messing around, and we walked into the campus and we saw this, and I kind of remember standing in front of the product design showcase, and
Okay.
that was this major epiphany, because I realized that in this showcase is pretty much everything that I've been passionate about pretty much all my life. I mean, I never knew that there's a place that could allow me to blend this crazy making instinct along with an interest in graphic novels, along with an interest in drawing and illustration, along with all the other crazy stuff that we used to get up to, and either at home or in school.
Okay.
And I in that showcase, actually speaking, the decision was really made standing in front of that showcase that now I just need to get here anyhow.
Could you share your initial, the thought that went into when you started the bus ride? By the way, I want to add, I like the name. I'm guessing, obviously, it's taken from your surname.
Yeah, I checked a few boxes. Yeah.
Was your surname often, were you ragged by that name, or like how did?
It was my name in dragging actually. So everyone called me Busride for some reason, and then it just became like my email address. The first it was my first email address, and I think I mean we kind of are generally quite fond of things that begin in unholy places, right? It's like, so if it's your name and it's whatever, it didn't. I mean, it also to some extent it framed a lot of the way we look at our own studio. I mean, I think we don't look at the studio as a big part of like it's not like some big brand we're trying to build, or we don't look at it with any. We look at it with as much disrespect as with respect.
Okay, that's nice.
So like, I mean, we could change the name tomorrow and call it Shit Toast or whatever, but it may not even change the nature of work that we do. So I don't think either me, Zameer, or including my father, who's now a part of the business. I mean, so none of us have actually ever looked at the studio as being this, big serious brand or something to be contended with. I mean, it was mostly an umbrella to house all the kind of madness that we wanted to do. So it's the umbrella doesn't really need a label. It's just something that gives you, a common identity to explore, I guess, in work.
Yeah.
And we wanted that thing to not be constraining in any way. So I think the fact that it's this tongue-in-cheek, fun name, it just allows us to, also constantly remember that we're not building this big brand, and we don't need to, think about ourselves with any more seriousness than which we look at the studio.
Yeah, that's actually a very healthy perspective, because everyone kind of gets stuck in the self-image and how they want to project it, and yeah. So that's interesting.
Yeah. Life is too short, man.
So how did the decision come about to start it?
So like most things, I mean, so we started off, we were very wary about working together. Like there was actually no plan to work together. So when we started off, I was studying industrial design, he was studying architecture, and my dad has a lot of his interiors clients were actually people who are fully in the Bora community. So these were three completely different worlds. Like there was no kind of conversation even about like let's do something together, because we just felt like I'm gonna probably end up. I was very very interested in shoes at that point. Like I really wanted to design shoes, and so that felt like it was going somewhere else only. Like shoes and toys were really what I wanted to do. And Zameer was a very very hardcore architect and used to like make one of Dad's work. And so it was like this very, everyone's ribbing each other all the time, and no one really felt that these worlds would ever overlap. So
Okay.
it was fairly, again, so we started working together on a project that was conceived by this other company called Locus in Pune, who's also run by some friends from design school. So they had, landed this project to design a campus. This is the MIT School of Design in Pune.
Okay.
So we both got on board in two different capacities. I got on board to write a manifesto for the institution in terms of how, like, what are the futures of these students, what are the kind of inputs that they need to get, and therefore what kind of campus needs to be designed for the space to facilitate those inputs.
Okay.
So it was like a sort of 2 degrees of separation, and then design the campus. And Zameer was involved in an architectural perspective, so he was taking that manifesto and then interpreting that in space. So this was actually the first project where we started working together, and we realized that every single conversation was magic. It's like a situation where sometimes you get into conversations with even family, friends,
Yeah.
and you realize that you leave the conversation slightly poorer than when you entered it. I'm not sure if you felt this. Sometimes conversations are reductive, right? Like
Yeah.
you feel like you feel sapped for energy, or you feel like I just wasted 2 hours of my life. But some conversations are so enriching and so kind of life affirming in some ways,
True.
that when you leave that conversation, you feel inspired and you feel like man, I learned 10 things which I had no idea. Uh, so, I realized that every single conversation with Zameer was that kind of conversation. He comes from a completely different space, but he's able
Okay.
to understand and add value. And the same, I'm able to see where he's coming from and add value to what he's doing. And because we've, always been taking each other's asses, there was no ego involved. So it just became something that just constantly kept building.
Okay.
And then we realized that we could make this work. So we then decided to formalize working together. We registered the studio, and then in fact immediately after registering, within 2-3 months, he went for his master's. So we were in like a long distance relationship for almost 3 years.
Okay.
So I was running the studio, but he was then consulting with projects. He was doing stuff from MIT in Boston, and so it was fairly fluid. There was no real big major plan, but I think it worked out really well. And now I'm still in Goa, he's in Bombay, but we run both studios together, and there's never really a sense of distance or a disconnect.
So was it hard to get clients during those initial days?
Not really, actually, because I think we approached it uh, without any kind of qualms. So our first few projects were, production design sets. We even built sandcastles for Disney. So, it was like a situation where, anything you have, give it to us and we'll do it. It was
Okay.
approached with that kind of a attitude. So I think the client process, and again, people who we worked with right in the beginning of our practice, have actually been regular collaborators. So like someone like Riyaz Amlani, for example, who
Yeah.
runs Impresario. We worked on one of his very first projects. But right till right through 15 years, we've always been working with him. So I think those relationships that were built, it was mostly like working with friends and people who like what we do and we like what they do. And every time they've grown, they've remembered us in their growth journey. So, we've kind of been a partner in that long-term sort of
Okay.
trajectory. So, yeah, that's worked out okay as well.
But usually what makes you take up a project? What do you look for in a project? What is a challenging element that you look in it?
I think so. We look for different things. Like I love working with the people behind the project. So I think even if it's never to do with budget, it's never to do with size or scale of project. It's never to do with that we won't do something less than 3,000 square feet, or whatever those kind of metrics that people place on projects.
Right.
Like we worked on this place called Between Breads, which is probably the size of your bathroom. It's like a really small ass burger joint. But
Okay.
because the people behind it were so passionate about making burgers, they felt that they had cracked it. Their burger was the defining burger. That anyone who smoked a joint they're going to make their way to this burger place and and eat that burger. It was like the ultimate stoner burger. So when you meet someone who's got that much passion and who's really loves what they do, you want to be part of their journey in any way,
Yeah.
and over their budget. I mean, we never discuss financials at a first meeting anyway. So we normally take on the project without arriving sometimes at a financial agreement. It's almost implicit that, okay, we're doing this project anyhow, and then you kind of, figure out how to make it work. It's not the most savvy kind of business approach, but I feel we can get into the spirit of the project a lot better without creating crazy kind of hurdles for ourselves.
Okay. I actually came across some which you had showcased about this collapsing living room that you had done and a chair that you had designed, which has, it's not like a regular chair. It has all those, like it ebbs and flows type. And I thought it was so interesting. You said you had designed it for a client. How often do you get such, can I say, freedom to express yourself, or is it really hard, um, to come up with such out of the box designs?
Yeah, so I think even that there is a little bit of a chicken and egg situation. I mean, we tend to. I think the first time you do it, you may have to work a little extra hard. Sometimes you feel like you're almost designing two projects. One project is the one that is expected of you,
Yeah.
and the second one is really the one that you really want to do. So because I think most people want to see that you've done the work, that you've delivered what it is that they have in mind first, but then you also are showing something that you believe they should either look at or buy into, or even just look at. I mean,
Okay.
there's so many times when we've suggested the counter of what has been expected, and people have found merit in it, like that. Okay, like I can take an example of Smokehouse Delhi, for example, where the first time so me and Riaz were actually walking around this mall in Delhi, and we realized that when you walk into some of these, and this is a time when Delhi was spending a lot of money on interiors. Like there
Yeah.
was upwards of 3.5, 4 crores or 5 crores sometimes spent on purely the interiors.
Okay.
And he did this. He was because he used to constantly keep talking about what's going on in his mind. So one of the things that he did was he was kind of taking me through the business of the restaurant. He was telling me, like, see, if you spend upwards of 5 crores, your break even is going to be pushed back by another 3.5, 4 years. So essentially, I mean, he was kind of breaking down the mathematics of the restaurant, and he was saying, okay, this is how much you're going to spend in rental, this is how much you're going to spend in staffing, this is how much you're going to spend in your, and he was saying it's a very slim margin business, so you cannot spend this amount of money on interiors. Primarily because that means that you don't have a business plan in mind, right? It's a
Yeah.
bit skewed. So you're saying that everything that you spend on interiors has to be this much, and so once you get into his head, once you understand the business, right, then you're able to actually take that as a brief and come up with something that. So I told him that what if I was able to say shave this off by half, right? Your fit out budget. Say you say budget for around 85 lakhs. What if you could do the whole thing in say 45 or 50? So he said that's fantastic because
Okay.
I'm almost getting free rent 3 months, and I can my staffing is better, my tips are better, everything kind of works, and etc. So Smokehouse Delhi, the idea of hand illustrating a restaurant, uh, it it came from parody, right? Like, so it says that, okay, this is what serious restaurant design is doing right now.
Yeah.
Let's do the complete opposite. Let's not compromise on the detail, on the thought process, on the the magic of the space and all of that. But let's just do it at a
Yeah.
crazy fit out budget. So essentially that whole space is just plywood. It's painted white and then drawn. So there's literally no additional expense in terms of wall coverings and all the other stuff that people are doing at the time. So I think these things start in interesting ways, but if you have a relationship with the person you're working with, which is beyond transactional, and it's a bit more nuanced, where they're also able to share their pain points. They're able to share, smaller insights about their own business that would better inform us. So,
Okay.
I mean, for me, it's always the people behind the business. Like, if you really vibe with the people behind it, and you get where they're going and get why they're doing what they're doing, then we can actually, become a part of that team. rather than it becoming a more transactional client versus it tends to become very adversarial. Like, okay, he's saying this, but I want this. It's framed like a debate, like two people versus each other. But this is more, it needs to be more synergetic. It needs to be a lot more symbiotic. Like, okay, this is what I'm doing. This is what you can add to it. This is the value that someone else would add. That's why I think as a studio, we've been very, very open to collaborations. Like, I feel like, being a collaborative studio is really, really the way forward. It suddenly became a monologue.
That was interesting to listen. That was with the Smokehouse Deli, that was a risk that you took and it paid off. But was there ever a risk that you took looking back and you wished it didn't turn out the way you had and you?
Yeah, lots, man, lots. So in the same vein, Smokehouse Room, which was another project we did in Delhi. Weirdly enough, that project is very conflicted because it's very, very close to heart. It still hurts that the place shut down. It still hurts that the place didn't do as well as we all thought it would, because it was a very, very fresh take on culture. It was really trying to conceive of a more progressive, society, more progressive music, more progressive food. It was really coming from a very, very pure place that, all of us really felt that, that this is the kind of, mix of flavor and space and music and, it's kind of almost a psychedelic melting of all these kind of entities, which becomes like a fairly conceptually driven project. And obviously, Riaz at that point was able to put a lot of money into that vision. So, the fit out budgets were almost 3 or 4 times what one would have preempted. The food cost was over 65%. So, it's one of those things that it's like completely passion driven project. And just one component of it, which was supposed to be the nightclub. The nightclub was really supposed to be the money spinner, right? So that then subsidizes everything. The nightclub failed. The nightclub never really took off. So I think, I think a lot of that passion and thought process actually informed the fit out of Bombay Canteen, which was a fundamentally different, like a different team, a different language, a different, completely different design. But the thought process of pushing culture in the right direction, that stayed true to what we were trying to do at Shroom as well. But then we learned our lesson in the way that Bombay Canteen creates comfort and nostalgia. Shroom just created this very, very impersonal, high design lab kind of a feel, so I think everything went too hard in one direction. And in a project like Bombay Canteen, what you're able to do is to rein that in a little bit. You're saying that, okay, let us do our bit. Let us create the comfort, nostalgia, warmth, all your familiar associations. And then F&B team, the brains in the kitchen, are then able to completely have a, like a clean palette. Like, then there's no experiment that is too bold, because the space is creating your base level comfort. If the space is also making you feel unsettled, then you may need to do more in the food to comfort people.
Yeah. I also like the fact when you're designing something, you're looking into the history of it, of not just maybe the area. Like you said in one of your interviews, how the first UFO sighting in India was on Lavelle Road. So that was a really interesting piece of information. So I was like, that was interesting for you to do that research. But at the same time, you're looking into the future. How can the space be taken forward? So could you tell me a little bit about that? Because I feel a lot of designers are sometimes just looking only at that space and not looking at how it can be a part of a bigger, whether it's the community or the area or the city.
I think you definitely wear a couple of hats when you're starting to design a project. One of the things that for us we're really excited about is always learning new things about, about context, and especially for Smokehouse Delhi and that kind of category of project. These are all city love projects, right? So because Smokehouse Delhi, once it moved beyond being a one-off, when it started being conceived of even by the internal team as a pan-India project, then you start, figuring out the grammar of what would work across India. So what is the core idea that we could take from House Village to to Lavelle Road or to Indiranagar or to any one of these places, and create a scalable idea. So it's not really making a design manual. It's really making a process manual. Like, how do you go about thinking about a smokehouse deli? And we kind of housed Smokehouse Delhi as a city love project. It's a place where, because you kind of realize that we were going through this thing as a nation where there was a lot of, like, Bangalore people were just madly in love with Bangalore brands, Bangalore beer, Bangalore, the entire kind of ethos of Bangalore. And Bombay had the same kind of feeling about Bombay. And then it was kind of broken down further into precincts, like, Bandra behaves different from Colaba, Colaba behaves differently from, say, the northern suburbs. So we were able to then conceive of a very, very highly localized kind of thought process, and say that let's do very deep research. Like, we go into, like, so for Indiranagar, because we have this beautiful, big glass facade, kind of felt like the whole garden city story fits really well into Indiranagar. So Indiranagar then references every single local flora and fauna that Bangalore has. There's also a long history of garden cities. Like, the idea of the garden city started in the UK. Then there are master plans. There are posters. The whole Art Nouveau movement began from this man meeting nature kind of a thought process. There's some beautiful evocative writings.
Okay.
So I think it's just a matter of how deep you look. There's this beautiful magical stories waiting to be discovered everywhere. So, like, on Lavelle Road, actually had like a self-imposed challenge that saying, forget about Bangalore, let's only find Lavelle Road history.
Okay.
And it's insane, like, the kind of stuff that's happened on every street in India. Like, we found, like, so James Lavelle was the person who discovered the Kolar gold mines.
Oh.
And and the Kolar gold mines were mining, coins from for the Indus Valley civilization. So, I mean, the linkages are just unbelievable. Like, it's sort of the whole web starts growing in your mind. Where you realize, okay, man, this guy is connected from this guy, this guy is connected from that guy. And then a Smokehouse Deli is drawn, effortlessly. Like, there's no, because the stories are just there to be discovered. Like, so it's just this whole sort of massive mental map opens up.
It's a huge web,
Yeah. And then you're just picking and choosing interesting stuff from there.
So is that why you're so passionate about artificial intelligence?
No, AI is just like a morbid curiosity. I mean,
no, just because sometimes AI can bring forth what is underlying of what is, something that is very obvious, but you don't see it.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, so I feel like I'm also fairly humbled by this, So my wife actually worked at a behavior consultancy, and she just mentioned something to me in passing. She said that, there's a lot of the current research in neuroscience actually points to the brain being a disabler and not an enabler.
Okay.
Right. So we typically look at the brain as being the seat of intelligence, as, the fact that everything we do is manifested from the brain's capacities. But the actual thing is a bit different. What happens is what we can experience is a lot wider than what the brain allows us to experience. So the brain actually puts filters.
Okay.
I mean, your eyes are seeing a lot more than what your mind is or what your brain is allowing you to focus on at a point.
Yeah.
Which is then the theory behind past life regressions, behind all these other interesting things that are part of the human experience, but is not something which one speaks about, because it kind of borders on the esoteric.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
So I feel if one looks at the brain as a disabler first, saying, okay, the reality is much, much larger than what I can experience because of my brain. With that base understanding, then any kind of augmentation becomes extremely interesting, right? Like, whether it be through psychedelic drugs, or whether it be through meditation, or whether it be through, traveling or dancing, or whatever it is that that connects you to the transcendental. Those all become very, very interesting things to explore. And like, for me, I feel generative design, this idea of algorithm, so
Yeah.
I mean, whatever intersects with our own design kind of field, one is anyway trying to dabble in, because we feel that could hold a clue to a greater understanding of
Okay.
Our own reality, and maybe there's some interesting knowledge to be gained there, which one could bring back into this realm and manifest it.
Do you see that taking off in a big way? Because we are moving towards an algorithmic society. There's algorithms everywhere.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, uh, you know, I think it may work a bit differently. I feel like a few visionary projects will, work on that backbone. Like, I mean, we've actually written something about this recently where we were looking at this idea of the algorithmic city, which is essentially suppose every single city is tagged with metadata, right? So, say for example, if you look at the room around where you're sitting right now, you have an say one air conditioning. You have, I can see, a black handle on your window.
Yeah.
Uh, so you essentially are surrounded by a universe of objects, right? And
Yeah.
if each of those objects had a metadata tag attached to it, where when you dismantle your home, um, your each of these objects is available to someone else who's putting together another home somewhere else.
Yeah.
So essentially, what algorithms do exceedingly well is they take apart and put together extremely efficiently. Like essentially, your DNA is an algorithm, right? Your DNA is able to zip and unzip with extremely few errors. So I think there's a 1 in a billion or something errors. So I mean, it's a very efficient process which happens seamlessly in every single cell, every single day. Almost effortlessly.
Yeah.
So
True.
if one could mimic that mechanism at a city scale, then you can actually take apart and put buildings together uh, by piggybacking on that sort of a biomimicry example of the way a DNA algorithm works. So I mean, it just takes, it just needs one or two projects to be able to do this and make that system available free for all. And then, it'll be very fast on the uptake. But I don't see, us teaching this in schools, for example. Like, I don't think we're there yet, that this is going to be part of curriculum or it's going to be, I
Yeah.
think this, because these technologies become platform technologies very fast. Like a Wikipedia just had to happen once.
Yeah.
And now it's not like I need to create my own Wikipedia to, you know, once it's there, it's there. And then,
Yeah.
it's also an open access tool for everyone.
So I read a piece that you wrote, The Dawn of Centaur Designers.
Wow. So you're like the second person who's read it.
No, it was actually a really interesting article. But do you think, as a society or even as a designers, maybe you're all up for it, but do you know other designers who would, be willing to let a machine kind of, lay the foundation to a design?
So I think this again. I mean, in parts, it brings you back to this idea of is your brain really an enabler or a disabler? And once you realize that okay, the spectrum of reality is much larger than what I can manifest with my own brain. Using a centaur or being part of this kind of centaur ecosystem, it would be like taking a performance enhancing drug, or it would be like having a cup of coffee maybe. It's like a additional part of your brain or an additional, I don't know, it's like a tool. I mean, it would be like a tool like AutoCAD or a calculator or something, I think, very banal. Like, these things start off in a very mundane way. I don't think it's going to start like saying, okay, here's your new brain, now use this kind of a thing. It's going to be mostly like,
Right.
okay, do you really want to calculate, wind velocity on your structure?
Yeah.
Let this app or let this thing, do it for you. But eventually you start trusting it more and more. Then the next generation of that app will also tell you, okay, maybe this is a better place to place your building. Don't place it here because it could potentially be in a high flood line, or it could be whatever. And then once you've got demonstrated results, the next time you start using that app, it may make all your preliminary decisions, and you then just put the aesthetic veneer on it towards the end. So I think there will be a gradual uptake once these tools are actually available to us. Uh, you know, and I feel it's a good thing. Like I don't look at this as in some way someone's infringing on my creative right as being a human. I feel, and this comes from statistics. Like I feel as a profession, architects and designers have really failed society, right? Like we don't provide any essential services. If it was our job to house society, we failed miserably at what they're supposed to be doing. So,
Why do you say that?
I mean, just statistics, right? I mean, say for example, in London, um, only 5% of buildings are designed by architects. Like, so
Okay.
95% of structures, which is informal housing, formal housing, government housing, you know, everything. Like, I mean, probably the homes in which you and me are building also not sort of you and me are living in are actually not designed by architects. They're designed by either a public works engineer or, or some sort of a contracting agency, which is, mass produced them. So
Yeah.
I don't think we engage with volume. Like, say, there'll be like, I think there was some 17,000 practices that were competing for the design of the Guggenheim in Helsinki.
Okay.
But 5% architects are actually working with public housing, So, I mean, there's a massive, dissonance within, I think, what our education teaches us to do. And I think these are jobs maybe better done by AI. Like maybe it's time for us to give, these kind of systems a chance where maybe they could house humanity. Maybe there would be less homeless people. Maybe there could be less. If you're able to build more efficient structures at a lower cost, maybe even providing a kit of kinds where people can build their own homes, like the way, say, you could actually stitch your own clothes tomorrow if you wanted to,
Okay.
given the right amount of incentive and tools and, so, I mean, all these things are essentially things that one needs to get, I guess, think about, because otherwise we're stuck in the status quo. Like, all of us are chasing clients who have the budgets and the vision and the, aesthetic
Yeah.
alignments with us. That's the first match that needs to happen. Uske baad, there are 10,000 other battles to fight, for you to actually build something that you're proud of and they are happy to live in. So I
Yeah.
think it's a fairly, friction heavy process. I mean, it would be in my best interest to create this platform which, makes us redundant as a profession. And then we can discover what it is that we're really supposed to be doing on Earth.
That actually brings to my next question. Quite often intervals, you've been mentioning how aesthetics should be the end of the process. I mean, the end result of the process and not as part of the process, which is interesting because often for a layperson like me, if I saw a space, first thing I would judge it is by aesthetics. And often I think designers get caught up in that. So how can you stand apart from, not be consumed by just the pretty, like you said, the pretty pictures?
Um, yeah, so I think it's two or three things. Like, see, the aesthetics, the whole aesthetic construct is fairly fragile, right? It is extremely subjective, right? So color
Yeah.
preferences vary from, I'd say, from city to village to village. What red means to you will mean different things to me. What you
Yeah.
find comforting as a color palette will be very different from what I find comforting. So one needs to realize the innate subjectivity of aesthetics. That when you say minimalism, uh, it may have a very different mental picture for me. So therefore, to say, I am a practice that only believes in, say, some hard to pronounce esoteric kind of term, or or like I'm a minimal practice or whatever. It actually means that, okay, these are the blinkers that I have on my head right now, right? I can experience the world purely through a minimalist lens. It becomes a bit. I think it's a mental shortcut. It's one of those things that practices define too early in their evolution, and then are stuck with.
Okay.
You know? And especially if it's coming from an aesthetic point of view, like, I mean, say, I'll just take minimalism for example, right? Like, you have the poster boy of minimalism was Mies van der Rohe, who, so I think in 1983 he built this Seagram building in Chicago, which is supposed to be like this sort of minimalist masterpiece, and it kind of set in motion this whole age of building skyscrapers with exposed structure and all that.
Okay.
But he cheated, right? So what he did was, minimalism says that there is no ornament. Everything that is structural has to be expressed, uh, honestly, and so you have minimal embellishment and all that. But so his entire structure was a metal, like an I section structure. But the Chicago fire codes, they prohibit you from using metal as an external thing, because essentially the metal starts getting very, very hot in case of a fire. So his
Yeah.
actual structure is encased within concrete, and then he's added fake I beams in front to make it look like
Okay.
that's a metal structure. So I mean, this is Mies van der Rohe. So you can forget about the amount of games that architects and designers play to make something look minimal.
Okay.
Uh, I think when aesthetic comes as a tag, okay, we are local or we are minimal or we are, those conceal massive lies, right? Like there's a lot of back calculation and a lot of jugglery that has to go on to make something look minimal. So you have this, clean flat slab, which is from inside the
Yeah.
house, it looks really minimal. But on top of the slab, you have massive inverted beams that's holding the whole thing to make it look flat and pretty from inside. So, I
Yeah.
mean, so I think the fakeness of it is what one is kind of trying to draw attention towards, saying that, if something emerges to be minimal, that's fine. But let's not start with minimalism as the starting point, right? Like,
Okay.
so if one has to derive it, it's okay. But I don't think one can use it as a generator. I mean, it's a great end product, but it's definitely not a
Okay.
starting point. Like so, and and so that's one whole thing of this idea of fakeness. The second thing is it's also the lowest hanging fruit. Like anyone with a Pinterest account
Yeah.
is as aesthetically informed as I am, uh, and is that the level of operation or the level of discourse at which I want to spend the rest of my life? Uh, because I would rather connect a very visually literate client to a great contractor and get out of the way, uh, rather than me being a kabutar in the middle. Okay, iska ye chahiye, isko wo chahiye. I just be the in between.
Right.
I mean, a whole lot of practices just tend to add noise. Like you could if this is what you have in mind, talk to the right execution agency, and it's a much better, faster, more economical way of achieving the same end result.
Okay. So what do you read, or what are your sources of inspiration, as in like how do you stay ahead in your game?
I mean, so yeah, reading is definitely it's been always a serious passion. I mean, reading all kinds of stuff. Actually.
Okay. Could you name a few, like what books have really caught your attention?
So recently I've been reading, actually rereading this book called The Thousand Plateaus.
Okay.
It's just an alternate view of culture. And then
Okay.
I've been reading a lot of Terence McKenna, who writes about like holy foods. He writes about mushrooms. Essentially, he's like a sort
Okay.
of psychedelic prophet.
Okay.
And then yeah, there's a bunch of other stuff like I've also been reading about mediation, which I think is quite interesting. This idea of how you can arrive at a win-win situation without taking positions. So essentially, you start seeing everything as spectrums.
Okay.
So yeah, stuff like that.
Okay.
I'm also very bad with books. I end up not finishing many. Like you drop something halfway, start two other things, then come back to that, and then reread that, and so it's all very chaotic.
I know that happens. Yeah. uh, so do you have other interests that you feel kind of adds to what you're designing? Other things that you're passionate about?
I've been kind of working with a very close friend, Avinash, who's putting together this amazing video game called Antarik Sanchar. So
Okay.
this is a sort of transmedia adventure set in this sort of hypothetical Tamil punk kind of a context. So I've been working with Avinash to help visualize some of the artifacts and objects which emerge in that culture. And so even therein is a great connect between a critique of what we see as contemporary visual culture. One only needs to take a look at Madurai to see the insanity and this maximal Indian culture that we're part of. Right? I mean, if you look at the Gopurams or you look at the kind of expression, the level of expression of detail and this insanely kind of visually rich tapestry,
Yeah.
coming from a tradition like that, I fail to understand where we became minimal. Like I mean, it just feels like two completely different worlds. And I mean,
Yeah.
for me, it's more like a study because there's really nothing you can contribute to that insanity. I mean, it's just to try to absorb as much as possible and then channelize it in some way. But just drawing those motifs and drawing those temples, you realize, just tracing over a line that has, come from such a visually rich culture.
Okay.
That itself is a, almost meditative exercise. It's really, really incredible.
That's true. Yeah. So how are designing spaces going to change after this whole COVID thing? How do you think, what are the parameters people are going to follow?
Um, it's one question which I don't think anyone has any answers to, man. But I think so because we are through this thing that we're part of called the Bandra Collective. I mean, we are
Yeah.
looking at a few ideas to make public spaces safer, and it's coming from fairly basic inputs. There's no big insight or big epiphany. It's just helping layout systems that are easy to execute, are quick, responsive. People can actually maybe modify them, change them a little bit once, and also infrastructure that can stay back and make that space permanently safe. Because maybe this is something that we have to live with for a while. It may not be like we may be talking about like maybe a 12 to 18 month kind of a window
Yeah.
where we're going to have to slowly get used to this as a new reality. Maybe. So then one is trying not to look at these projects with a heavy hand, saying that enforce laws. I mean, it's mostly done in a more lighter way, saying that okay, this is an ideal situation, and if the market is made safer during a pandemic, there's a chance that it's going to be safer anyway, even for the future. Yeah. So one is trying to
Yeah.
think about it in that way. One of the big, I think, maybe the silver linings that come out of this whole situation is that this whole work from home and spending more time at home. I mean, we also realize that how static our homes actually are, right? Like we don't actually, like say for example, your like a regular living room. Most design and architecture would essentially, find a wall to put a TV. Then you'll find a wall opposite that TV to put a big couch, and there'll be a
Yeah.
coffee table in the middle. There'll be maybe a bookshelf and some plants, and we call our work done.
Yeah.
Uh, but if you have to spend 6 months in that configuration, I mean, you want to burn that couch or you want to burn that TV set. I mean, it's not doing anything apart from being a static backdrop, right? So
Yeah.
I think like homes will need to become active parts of our lives again. They were always an active part of our lives, never really conceived of as backdrops. I mean, a home should actually be able to make you a better person, right? Like a home should be able to inspire you on a daily basis. A
Yeah.
home should be able to make you smile if you're feeling down. So these are performative aspects of homes that we lost somewhere in the design process. And I feel the aesthetic tags or the the more outward looking, like I want my home to look like this because I entertain a lot, or I have but now in the time when you're not allowed to entertain, you actually start, you've got to live with this home now. You've got to see how, how active and how inspiring it could be on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to put a large onus back on the design of the home. I think also
Okay.
maybe I would say our generation or maybe a few years, 5, 6 years. I mean, we also have seen a collapse in terms of gender roles. Like I mean, at least maybe we're still coming from this whole patriarchy kind
Yeah.
of baggage, but
Slowly. Yeah.
yeah, but maybe like I'm optimistic about my son, and maybe his generation would have definitively parked this whole shit behind them, and and we are trying to achieve a same gender, same roles kind of a balance even now, and hopefully it just gets better as we go along. So I feel like there's now a lot more understanding of what a home needs to be. Like if say the guy is fulfilling a stereotypical gender role that he leaves out at 9 in the morning, comes back at 8 at night, and is expecting dinner to be laid out and then just go watch some TV and go to sleep. The pandemic has changed all of that. Like now people are forced to be at home the whole day, sweep, pick up your shit,
I know. Yeah.
do dusting, cleaning, sanitization, wash vegetables with 3 different kinds of soap.
Yeah. Sit with the kids for their classes.
Yeah, I mean all that stuff, right? I mean, so I feel for culture at large, it's been a fairly large wake-up call, just in terms of the activities that a more active home demands, and then that should become the brief for the next round of homes to be conceived of. So yeah, so I think we will probably move into a slightly more intelligent kind of a reality rather than latching onto these aesthetic kind of tags. Like, how will you maintain a minimal home in the middle of a pandemic? Everything will be sanitized.
Yeah. So like quite a few people have said, like earlier I wished my house was bigger. Now I'm actually happy with the size of my house.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, there's another interesting point I thought wanted to share with you. You've designed so many restaurants, and earlier in my one of the podcast episodes, I spoke to a chef and a restaurateur,
Oh,
and she
okay.
was saying about how, going forward, she was thinking a lot of restaurants might do the drive-in concept. She was probably talking more with case of Chennai because where the space is not an issue.
There's a similar insight to most services. Like, so for example, one of my closest friends, I was mentioning Akash, who does a lot of theater. I mean, we were having this chat about, why do audiences and the stage need to be in the same location, right? Like, I mean, what really has happened is the audience no longer feels safe
Yeah.
in that space. The performance can happen, in many ways. If one delinks the stage and the audience, and the performance goes to where the audience feels safe, which is the drive-in format for restaurants for sure, because
Yeah.
you're safe in your own car. You come up, you pick up your stuff, and now it'll be a matter of creating a great experience out of that. Like what are the different touch points? Like say in a restaurant, you have maybe 50, 60 touch points to play with.
True.
Right from the ritual of coming in, does someone come wash your hands? Does someone come and do this, that? Like there's so many other interesting ways in which restaurateurs make sense of the whole restaurant experience for you. But in this kind of a format, your packaging becomes interesting. Your which is normally some white dabba which is screwed onto each other and given, say, okay, this is your doggy bag for the day. All of those things
Yeah.
become additional touch points, right? Like, all of these things will need to be now thought from a branding perspective, from a, guest experience perspective. And I think some of the more progressive restaurants are already thinking about this. They've
Yeah.
already kind of, but it'll be a while. It's going to be a while. It's not so much about what the restaurant is doing in its physical space. It's also about the mind space of the guest coming in. Like how nice an experience are you going to have in a restaurant if you hear someone coughing behind you,
True.
right? Like it's more about your mind space. It's more about you feeling comfortable in that situation. Or you go completely in some personal protective equipment kind of situation, wear a mask, put it out, have a bite, put the mask down.
I know.
I mean, it's going to be like going out into some sort of, you know, I mean, there's a pandemic. So, I mean, it's like going out into
Yeah.
some war zone and then, sitting and having a romantic meal.
And plus, restaurants are places where conversations happen. So,
Yeah. So I think it'll be a while. I mean, and because we've been talking to, the Bombay Canteen team a lot. In fact, we started off on a project designing a post-COVID restaurant for them, saying that let's look at
okay.
Bombay Canteen from a post-COVID perspective. Trying to put together international research guidelines, social distancing guidelines. So all of that is possible, but some of it heavily dilutes the guest experience to a point where it would probably drive away guests, from a space that they love. And,
Right.
so one needs to then figure it out. I mean, there's a way in which some of the restaurants may just choose to survive, by paying lesser rentals to their landlords, just riding out this wave as much as possible with, minimal staffing, delivery models as much as possible,
Okay.
and just hope for some kind of a light at the end of the tunnel, I guess.
Yeah. There was a Spanish flu pandemic that happened almost 100 years ago. Maybe when you were doing research, did anything come up during that time and space, how things were designed?
No, so there is a little bit of it. I mean, so these diseases are heavily reliant on light and ventilation. Like
Yeah.
in fact, so Sameep is one of the studios. Sameep Padara, he runs an architectural practice, and he's done some amazing research on Bombay as a city. And what he was looking at is the last flu epidemic and how that aspected the bylaws of building in Bombay. So, before that, before those bylaws were implemented, the city actually became a place for these kind of respiratory illnesses to propagate.
Okay.
Because you have very less light and ventilation, very limited access to open space, families living very cramped together, maybe sharing a toilet. So all these kind of
Right.
situations which characterize our city experience today are now becoming hotspots, and people are saying, oh, that's a hotspot, but it's been designed to be a hotspot. I mean, it's a hotspot for every kind of social problem that one could think of in the spectrum of humanity. And
Right.
uh, it's crazy to kind of have these spaces which are then ignored and completely marginalized, and when they become, I mean, the most marginalized people suffer the most. It's really one of those unfortunate realities. Which this is really coming back to the point where I feel we as a community have really failed society. Like, I don't think we provide anywhere close to the services that we think we provide to people. We exist 90% in a private realm. Very, very few architects and designers even engage with the public realm. Like how many people do you know designing promenades or designing public spaces or streets or
Yeah.
footpaths and all these are, I mean, as compared to designing like a high profile residence for 3 people, which gets featured into like say 15, 20 design magazines. The impact, if you measure impact, like what have we impacted as a community of so-called professionals?
Yeah.
It's a very pitiful kind of a situation. So, some of the work that we're trying to do with the Bandra Collective, some of the work that we're also setting up something called the Goa Collective, which purely looks at public-facing projects. That none of the private-facing projects even come into those collectives because these are the group of people who are just passionate about doing more and more of that. I also realize that we live in a complicated ecosystem. We can't. Most of these projects are pro bono, like they don't pay. So there's no economic model to be discovered here. So it has to be then be cross-subsidized. So we are doing, the other side of work as well. But the hope and dream is that in the future, or maybe in the next generation of designers or architects, they're able to actually figure out a robust business model for them to only do public-facing work.
Okay.
Where you say no to any private commission. So you want to work only in the public domain, and then the cities will change.
Yeah. So what are the projects you're working on at the moment?
So we're doing a bunch of things. I mean, currently we are working on. We're working with the Goa Collective. We're trying to actually work with some master planning work in Old Goa. So we're trying to actually figure out what's an interesting, landscape proposal and kind of, say, for example, a productive farming proposal for Old Goa as a precinct, where one could create like sort of Renaissance gardens almost, where like a garden as a place for public activity. So it draws people into those gardens for leisure time activities and creating the sort of vibrant cultural center, which it always was. It's the second largest city in Asia at one point. So yeah, there's projects like that. We're also doing some work with the future of craft. We've also been part of this really interesting group called Creative Dignity. This is a bunch of practitioners, architects, NGOs, designers, craftsmen.
Okay, it's called Creative Dignity, is it?
Creative Dignity, yeah. So this is again a pandemic response. Like this is when COVID just started. There was this whole diagnostic that went out across 28 states to see what was the state of artisans and craftsmen in the country. And based on that diagnostic, now relief has happened. Money has been dispersed to various at-risk communities. We are obviously a small part of that team, but that's one of the things that they're also doing to kind of support that initiative using something called My Craft Stories. Right now, we're not a big active part of it because it's mostly the focus is around relief. But the third phase of this is around rejuvenation, which is to reimagine craft. Which say, can craft solve contemporary problems? Like why doesn't craft or why isn't craft looked at as a resource for, say, like the aerospace industry or the high performance automobile industry, for example. So what does craft need to do to be part of that paradigm, and how can we shift our perspective of looking at craft as like a rural, marginalized, sort of fetishized kind of an object, rather than it becoming something very cutting edge and postmodern in that way. So, I mean, that's one side of it. And then we're also doing a bunch of other fun stuff.
All right. Thanks so much, Ayaz.
Thank you, Marty. Thank you so much.
Hope you enjoyed this week's episode. Do subscribe to us if you don't want to miss any future episodes. Take care.